thank you all so much for coming. I'll sort of draw you away from cake, but hopefully I can excite you in the history of the Bath Assembly Rooms in the Georgian period. So I'm a member of the National Trust Specialist Advice Network, and at the moment I'm linked to the Bath Assembly Rooms project, which is run by the National Trust. It's a major initiative. If any of you've been to Bath, you may well have been to the Assembly Rooms. It's been on the, it's a major tourist attraction in Bath. It was opened in 1771, part of a redevelopment of the Upper Town by John Wood the Younger, including the Royal Crescent and the Circus. And it quickly became the social hub of Georgian Bath. And it was a venue for a whole range of activities: eating, gambling, concerts, balls and dances. So fast forward to now, the National Trust have owned the building since the 1930s, but it was only in March of last year that they came into the full management of the rooms. And so the Bath Assembly Rooms is on the next step of its journey. It will shortly have a £17 million refurbishment, and it's due to reopen towards the end of 2026. And part of that reopening is a visitor experience, and it's designed to bring the bring the Georgian heyday of the Bath Assembly Rooms to life for the modern visitor. It's a multi-sensory experience, and we want to tell the stories of Georgian Bath, of the Assembly Rooms, not just the visitors to the rooms, but also the stories of the people that worked there. So hopefully there'll be some new stories to tell that the public haven't had a chance to experience before. Now, the visitor experience is designed by, there's experienced designers and also a curatorial team, and they will ultimately decide the content of the visitor experience. My role as a specialist advisor, I'm one of a number of specialist advisors in different fields who've been brought onto the project to ensure that the decisions the curators make have a solid grounding in research. I'm a musicologist, and the reason why music is very important for the Bath Assembly Rooms is because it was such a major part of the social, cultural and economic activities of the rooms. Most people, when they think of the Bath Assembly Rooms, immediately think of balls, Jane Austen style. And the Bodleian has been really important for my research, largely because the Bath Assembly Rooms are a very unusual property for the National Trust. When most people think of a National Trust property, they think of a house, and this might be a small or very, very grand, but usually a former domestic space that is filled with lots and lots of objects. The Bath Assembly Rooms, however, have always been a public event space. So we have these very, very beautiful rooms, but there's not much by way of an in-house collection. We've got some lovely chandeliers, but no library, and no archive as such. We have some materials from the first 5 years that the Assembly Rooms was open, some committee minutes, for example, but most of the research that we're doing, we have to step outside the building. And of course the Bodleian Special Collection has been amazing because it has a wealth of late 18th century materials. And so I'm very, very grateful for this experience because it's given me a chance to actually work with objects rather than just remote working online. So I've got several prongs to my research, but of course one of the crucial ones has been to look at the dances and balls. And this is one of the things that our visitors, we know that they'll be very interested in. But from a musician's perspective, it's one of the more challenging aspects of music culture to research, because there's very little documentation. If you think of concerts, they're often advertised with named performers and with the pieces named, the works that are actually being performed. It's not the case with dances. And so actually learning how, even just how the ballroom was arranged, what the seating was like, how did the dancers and the musicians communicate with each other, how many musicians were in the band, what was the instrumentation. These questions, I've been working with a historic dance advisor, Dr. Moira Goff, to really think about these questions in some detail. But the collections here offer us some clues. What we've got here are two examples from a wealth of these. The Bodleian have lots and lots of these. But so these are just one tiny sample. But these are annual collections of dances, and they're often published after the season, and often for a domestic market, but they give us some insight into the dances being performed at the assembly rooms. So we're still dealing with the problem of thin notation. Often there's just a melody line and the figures of the dance. So we've still got to work out from there what this music sounded like when it was played by a band. But some of the iconography, as you can see on this one here, offers us some clues. It's not always reliable, but it gives us some insight. And then over here, we have, this is a clarinet part of dance music. And again, anything that gives us some clues as to how this thin notation was interpreted by a group of musicians is enormously helpful. And then we also have here this tiny, I love it, this tiny little manuscript. It's very interesting to see that movement of dances from the ballroom to people's homes, and to think about which dances were particularly popular, which were the ones that people had brought home with them that they chose to write out, they chose to keep themselves. It gives us some idea here. And together, these are really interesting documents for us, because particularly if I'm looking at some of these over a 30, 40-year period, they really give us an insight into how the fashion for dance has changed. So starting with a lot of minuets and country dances, and then moving into strathspeys, reels, hornpipes, and then later waltzes. So you can really see how the fashion for dance evolved over that time. And interestingly here as well, you start to see Bath being mentioned specifically. These are the dances as performed in Bath. So Bath becomes this advertising feature, it becomes this advertising hook. It creates its own marketing, if you like. So this can be souvenir pieces as well. Then coming down here, this is very important. This book does a lot of heavy lifting for us because several Bath musicians are mentioned in this book. We try whenever possible to identify Bath musicians, to actually have some names and to know which instruments they played. And that's a collection of dances by Mr. Cantello. It's usually attributed to Hezekiah Cantello, but the Cantello family were very prominent musicians in Bath. And they performed at the assembly rooms. But like many musicians, we're trying to work out what was the wider pattern of their working life? Were they only musicians? And if so, what did they do beyond performing in the Bath assembly rooms? Did they compose? Did they collect music, as Hezekiah Cantello did here? Did they teach music as well? What were their networks, widely in Bath, but also in London too? It's amazing how well-travelled the musicians are at this time. There's a constant movement between Bath and London. And this is really interesting for us because Hezekiah Cantello here has collected American country dances. And so we see the international influence here, that there's an exchange, not just in Bath, not just in the UK, but internationally as well. And he's added to his collection of American tunes, he's also added some minuets of his own composition. And those are very interesting for us too. You'll see, as you really look at some of the titles, some quite interesting and quirky titles. But also some of the dances are named after particular individuals. There's Miss Walton, for example, has a minuet dedicated to her in that volume. And these give us some ideas of the patronage systems in Bath as well. So who are the prominent society figures, but also who are the figures that gave money for music making in Bath. And then over here, we have two pieces of music by Venezio Vazzini, and he's a really important figure in the Bath story. He was an Italian castrato. He came to London initially as a performer, as a singer, and then he settled in Bath in 1781, and he ran the subscription concert series in Bath until his death in 1810. And this is a little gold mine, this volume here, because this is a volume of his own compositions, and it was engraved, printed and sold in Bath, and it actually lists the engraver, the printer and the seller, so we can follow the production of this music around Bath. We know the addresses of these different places. And the practice at the time, printers often gave copies of music to the composer to sell themselves from their own doorstep. And I suspect that this is one of those copies. Valenti might have sold it himself because it's got his handwriting dotted throughout, which is why I'm particularly excited by this Bodleian copy. It's a periodical collection. It was published by subscription. There's a list of subscribers in the back. Again, to understand patronage systems, this is really, really exciting. And again, dotted throughout the book, you've got the name of the subscriber written in. So this is really helpful for us to understand the instalments in which this music was produced, and as well as actually kind of identifying the subscribers there. You've also got some annotations by Razzini where some things have been missed in the printing process. So he's gone in and he's changed any spelling mistakes, or he's added in a few instructions as well. So this is wonderful to see his hand in this particular copy. And then also this volume here is an absolute cornucopia of annotations as well. This is a real joy. And again, it's one of his works in a collection bound with other pieces from the period, and that very much helps us to understand the context in which people were buying this music. What else were they buying with it? What else were they interested in? Again, how were they using this music? How were they performing it? So we don't just look at Bath and these individual composers in isolation. And then I just want to finish with another very prominent Bath composer here. This music is by a physician, Dr. Henry Harrington of Bath, and he's a very, very interesting person to think about, because he was there as not principally as a musician in Bath. He was there as part of the medical world of Bath, and we've got to remember in the midst of all of this that the reason why Bath became very popular in the first place as a tourist destination was because of the pump room, because of the waters, and all the medical treatments associated with it. But it's very interesting that even when he's composing, he often markets himself very much as Dr. Harrington, or Dr. Harrington of Bath, or Mr. Harrington of Bath. His identity as a physician and as a Bath person is very, very important here. And he's written a glee here on the arrival of Bath, this practice of ringing the bells for important people whenever they arrived in Bath. They'll come to the end, I promise. And on that note, literally, one of the questions we come back to again and again in the project is the line between music, welcome music, and unwanted noise. Because Bath was, for many people, a place of recuperation and recovery. But then it was also this entertainment centre. And there were times when music was a dancing, as exercise, it was considered to help people's health. It was considered to be conducive to good health and to recovery. And there were times as well when actually music and dancing, this was a bad thing. You were in a hot, crowded space, and it was just far too noisy. And people often complained in their experiences of Bath about just about the sheer noise. And so I wanted to finish with this poem here, this Christopher Anstey poem, very well known, yes, from the New Bath Guide, which talks about exactly that, about the noise of Bath. And these are very interesting things to think of as well when it comes to designing any kind of audio content for a visitor experience, about what is welcome sound and what is unwelcome. So I'll leave that and you can come and talk to me. So thank you ever so much.